I would like just to move something like some very important relations with India. Before that we continue with China. I would say that India represents something very spectacular for Mexico. Ambassador, I think that you have some clear ideas about what we can do with Mexico and India. You are working so hard in that regard. Then I would like to ask you, Ambassador Chinoy, what is your opinion? I think that as ambassador we are going to present a good case about Mexico, but we would like to know, you express what is specific problems to find in order to increase and related to Mexico.
Thank you, Julio. I can assure you that my job as ambassador is slightly harder than playing golf with you sometimes. But it's a privilege to be here to participate in this very prestigious event, and as the topic suggests, it's time for Mexico to move on from a romanticized notion of Asia to the more pragmatic imperatives of doing so. And historical trends, current trends, future trends all point in this direction. You're all aware of the fact that Mexico's first phase of globalization came about as a result of Asia. It was through the Manila, Acapulco galleon trade that Mexico actually globalized in centuries past. The untapped potential of Mexico's relationship with Asia is best exemplified in the fact that of the 44 FTAs that you have, 12 FTAs with 44 countries and regions, there's only one in Asia, that is with Japan in the form of a preferential trade agreement. And if Mexico is to realize its true potential, its global vision, and wants to integrate with global economic currents, the best place to start would be Asia. Why Asia? The fact of the matter is that in recent decades you see a dramatic fracturing of political and economic power, like never before. And the two economic and financial crises seems to have accelerated this dispersal of political and economic power. A great deal of the global economic engines have shifted to the Asian landmass. But remember, just because there are two Mr. Chans and one Mr. Amb.Wu Jianmin on this panel doesn't mean that Asia is just China. There's more to it. There's a Chinoy from India as well. I dare say that my Chinese name sounds Chinese very much. It's Chi-Chan. that would make false. The fact of the matter is that there is more to Asia than just China, which has had a spectacular success and rise in terms of its economic development over the past 20 years. But I want to tell you a few facts. Look at the emerging dynamics in Asia. Asia's large population, a full 60% of the global population, is in fact being exposed to high growth rates of 6% or more for the first time in 200 years. Asia straddles very important trade and cooperative highways, such as APEC, ASEAN, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Asia is also witnessing unprecedented flows of capital, technology, and human resources. Now, this is the context. Within Asia, if you look at ASEAN, 600 million people, an economy, combined economy of $2 trillion US, it's emerged as a major geopolitical and economic organization, and it's becoming the nucleus of an integration process underway in Southeast and East Asia. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership is going to bring about much closer cooperation between the 10 ASEAN countries and its 6 FTA partners. At the end of the day, that's going to be a combined economy of $17 trillion. That's roughly 40% of global trade, and with a population of 3 billion people. Then you have the very exciting prospects of the Trans-Pacific Partnership coming through. And this may well bring about much closer relations across the Pacific. But remember that the TPP for Mexico is likely to do two things. One, it's going to compel Mexico to broad-base its imports from Asia. It may no longer just be China that supplies $57 billion worth of exports, but it probably become more broad-based. The second think that this is the law of unintended consequences. When you have the specter of very tough rules of origin coming through the TPP, you may well see Chinese investments coming into Mexico in unprecedented manner, so that Chinese companies take on a Mexican identity and become part of the local supply chains, which will obviate any threat of the rules of origin coming into play. Look at the pragmatic reasons for Mexico to reach out to Asia. Most Asian economies today are growing at above the global average of 3%. Take China, for instance, 7.5%. Indonesia, between 5.5 and 5.9%. You have the Philippines growing by 7%. India and Thailand in the neighborhood of 4%. The average in East Asia is 7.1%. There is a turnaround, of course. This was mentioned yesterday in the US economy. And any turnaround, however small, in the US economy can only be good news for Mexico, given the kind of reliance that it has on the American market. 78% of Mexico's exports go to the United States. But equally, this kind of reliance on the Mexican exports on the US market can prove counterproductive. Either way, Mexico does need an alternative narrative. There is the demographic dividend in Asia, which is not found elsewhere. Countries like India, Indonesia, the Philippines have very youthful populations. Youthful populations also mean more labor available for the manufacturing and service sectors. It also possibly means, with growing incomes in Asia, larger markets. So this is something that's happening in Asia at a time when the rest of the world is seeing an aging population. There are other new compulsions like labor arbitrage, the cost arbitrage that's still currently in favor of Asia. Asia also, remember, provides the most dynamic markets for Mexico. Between 2005 and 2010, Mexico's exports to Asian countries grew by an average of 17.5%, whereas it was only 6.2% with its regular FTA partners. And I told you at the beginning, Mexico doesn't have much of an FTA arrangement in Asia. So this is the market to go to. Don't forget the security dynamics. We tend to think of the world as compartmentalized, but in this age, the digital age where passwords are more important perhaps than passports, and geography or the tyranny of distance is no longer an impediment to closer engagement, nor does it give you the luxury of being ignored to what is happening in other parts of the world. Remember the security dynamics. Asia is the only continent which has been able to handle its economic growth even in the face of new and emerging threats like terrorism, radicalism, even an arms race, high military spending, weapons of mass destruction, piracy in the Indian Ocean, which casts a shadow on all the major sea lanes of communication, all the way from the Horn of Africa to the Straits of Malacca. This is a region which accounts for 30% of global trade, half the world's container traffic, and vital energy supply chains. So in this interconnected world, you really cannot think of yourselves as being distant neighbors. Everybody is a close neighbor. Think of other things like, for instance, energy. Energy is a very important dimension to Mexico's emerging relations with Asia. And I'll bring India into this equation as well. The US is currently Mexico's largest market for its crude oil. But increasingly, the United States is becoming self-sufficient on account of its rising shale oil and gas production. Mexico will need new markets. Why? Currently, half of the world's top 10 oil-consuming countries are to be found in Asia. That's China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, India, and the Republic of Korea. You have all these big markets for oil consuming. These are oil-consuming countries. According to the Energy Information Administration, world energy consumption will rise by 56% over the next 3 decades. And much of this growth is going to come from the dynamic economies of China and India. India is already Mexico's third largest market for oil, after the United States and Spain. And I dare say the customer is always right. Agriculture and tourism. This is an area not often spoken of when we look at Mexico's relationship with Asia. But as global warming and unpredictable weather patterns take over, and you have this huge looming question of food security in many parts of the world, including Asia, I think Mexico can play a vital role. You are host to dynamic institutions like CECHIMEX, for instance, and CECHIMEX or Mexican organizations can help Asia achieve food security. It's done so in the past as well. Let me briefly just tell you that India and Mexico, I'll end with that, bring my country in. We have a very dynamic relationship. We have a privileged partnership. Our bilateral trade is $6.3 billion US and growing at an astounding 45% per annum. So it's one of your most dynamic relations, provided you recognize it. Bilateral trade is evenly matched, and there's opportunities for both sides in terms of exports of goods, services, and technologies. And mutual investments are on the rise. Mexican companies are looking at various sectors in India, particularly food and beverages, entertainment. You have companies like Cinepolis, you have Omex in construction, you have Tremek, Nemak, and Metalsa in the automotive industry in India. Likewise, Indian companies are looking at opportunities in information technology, pharmaceuticals, and the automotive industry in Mexico in order to be part of North American supply chains and NAFTA. So we have a very thriving trade relationship with opportunities in pharmaceuticals and elsewhere. The overhang is there. It is for us to make use of these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have the time to go some specific recommendations that you had very kind of Ambassador Chinoy, do you want to say something about the...
Yes, thank you, Julio. For India, education is of vital importance. You know, India has done very well over the past few decades in knowledge-based industries. In some parts of India, we have a saying, if you want returns in 1 year, you invest in crops. If you want returns in 10 years, over 10 years, you invest in fruit trees. But if you want returns over 100 years, you invest in people. And India has been doing that for a very long time. We have to do that. We have 1.2 billion people. A full 600 million people in India, one half of our population, is below the age of 25. And we have to educate them in order that they can contribute positively and become positive vectors in our economic development. When the rest of the world will age by 2020, India will put into the job market 47 million new workers. And we have to equip them. It's not good having just a large and youthful population. Unless we educate them, unless we provide them the right kind of training, they will not be able to contribute as a positive force in our economy. And the most important step that India has taken in recent years is the Right to Education Act. It's been made compulsory in India. It's incumbent on the government, in fact, to make sure that everybody in India gets educated. It's not just the people who are required to seek education, it's the government that's required to, by this act, to provide education.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador,
one quick comment and then my 3 points. The first comment is that somebody mentioned why not more Chinese investments in Mexico. You've got to remember that in Asia, basically there are 3 dominant players in terms of interlocutors for Mexico. One, China. Its profile with regard to Mexico is more on account of trade, particularly exports to Mexico. 2, you have Japan. 3, Korea. Japan and Korea are here in a bigger way in terms of investments. But as I said before, this is going to change. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, mind you, when it kicks in the next 5 to 10 years, you will see a surge in Chinese investments in Mexico. And this process will be helped by the fact that the wage gap between Mexico and China is fast closing. If it was 1:5 10 years ago, it is less than 15% now. And the Chinese will want to be part of the supply chains here to take on a NAFTA or a Mexican identity since they're not part of the TPP. My 3 points. 1, always remember that Asia is more than just China, Japan and Korea. There are other countries as well. 2, please invest more in all the emerging economies in Asia. Link up more with them. These are large markets and they can do well with your technologies. Mexico has excellent technologies and processes developed over the past 20 years as a result of a very active coexistence with NAFTA on the North American continent and with the Europeans as well. this is of great interest to Asia. So please reach out, move out, and offer your hand to other Asian economies. My message to President Peña Nieto would be the same. And I would add that please come to India very soon. We will welcome you in India. When presidents go to other countries on official visits, we always have a large contingent of entrepreneurs, and they will come to India and see for themselves the great changes that are taking place. Remember, you cannot go it alone. We cannot go it alone. We will have to do it hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Eventos como el Business Summit permite ver una panorámica global en el mundo, global en México, ligarlos todos y actuar en consecuencia. Esa es la gran ventaja. De tal manera que el tiempo que le dedicamos a esto es un tiempo muy útil para nosotros, para nuestras empresas, obviamente, para nuestros países, para nuestras relaciones. Yo quisiera agradecerle tanto al embajador Jianmin, a Enrique Dussell, al embajador Chinoy, a Ronnie, muchas gracias, al Sujan Chinoy, muchísimas gracias por haber estado con nosotros y a ustedes por su participación. Y seguiremos en estas reuniones que serán siempre muy productivas. Muy buenos días.